All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Empowered Grief Journey. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self-acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories along with practical tools and actionable insights that can help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have an awesome guest that I'm excited to have on because she and I connected in a podcast group over a month ago. We finally had the chance to connect. So I'm going to introduce Jasmine onto the podcast. Jasmine has a experience that some people have had. I haven't had it yet happen to me, but she lost her father a few years ago. And long story short, she was very, very close to her father, kind of like I was to my grandfather. And so I'm very excited and honored to have her on our podcast today to share her father's story and share her grief journey and healing journey with us. So, without further ado, Jasmine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. And like I said, I like to be able to talk about it. I was very close with him. So being able to share him and who he was and kind of what legacy he kind of left behind, I guess, is nice for me. So I kind of started the beginning. So I was, it would have been, I had my first child in March of 8th. My father worked as a heating and cooling person, and he'd fallen down some icy stairs around Christmas time, and it hurt for a lot longer than it should have. So we went to a doctor, and they found out that he had prostate cancer, the size of a grapefruit, because his doctor had not given him prostate exams. But we weren't told how bad it was yet. So we didn't know what a mass is. He also had this lump on his neck that hurt. So I should go back. He had the injury, plus he had this lump on his neck, and it just kept getting bigger. And with the injury and the lump, we just like thought because he had had congestive heart failure in the past to see what this was, right? By the point where we find out that he has cancer and everything, I'd already had the child. I remember being in the hospital with him and him being in so much pain, and we had no idea why he was in so much pain, but he just wanted to be there with his first grandchild. He wanted grandchildren so badly, but I was 29. I made him wait quite a while. So this was very, very, very exciting to him, right? So anyhow, a few months down the road, obviously, because this kept getting bigger, he'd gone to the doctor. And I remember when found out that he had cancer. My daughter was in this ball pit playpen, but it luckily had guards up, so I could lay on the ground and she wouldn't see me, right? So I got the phone call from my father telling me that yes, it's cancer. And I lay down on the ground and cried like you've never cried before in your life just because, yeah. And he
It's
had just said that this was cancer and he was going to get radiation on it. And then after they go in and take a deeper dive, they realize that it's the size of a grapefruit. That injury was actually the cancer had metastasized into his bones. And yeah, he was very
wow.
ill. Um, but he decided that he can do whatever he wants and did not retire from work and kept working, didn't tell his work that he had been diagnosed with cancer. And with HVAC, certain old air conditioners, they have to like suck on them to get the whatever it is, freon, whatever to flow. And he got septic shock from this, right? And they had him in a medically induced coma for 3 months. I had the baby, so I would go home all day and I would sleep with him in the ICU at night because they didn't take the best care of them at night because nobody was watching them, right? So I would not leave because I seen things. They all told me to pull the plug, that he was never coming back. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with him until one day somebody from work came to visit him and explained that this is something that happens out that they do at work. And that's how they figured out what the fungus in his lungs was, right? But he missed so much cancer treatment because of the septic shock that it really affected him. Like he maybe could have got another couple, maybe 5 years, maybe. But because of that, that set his whole immune system back, everything, right? He had to learn how to walk again. Yeah, so then he came home and that this was like the beauty period where I had like the routine where I would get up, I'd make my daughter breakfast, I'd make my dad breakfast, we'd all sit together. My dad called the breakfast club. Like things were good at the time, like if you're gonna look back at hard times, this was the honeymoon phase. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like he was able to be there for her first Halloween. I have pictures of him giving her like candy and her little thing, and we made sure everything was really special while he was still around. Even like I still have his name tag from our Thanksgiving that year. And um towards the end, he developed this brain cancer that is very, very rare, which they actually consider viral. And if anybody contracts this, they usually only live up to 6 weeks. And he died right around, right almost after Christmas. So a Christmas ornament had fallen out of the tree into his Christmas gift, and he thinks that's the ornament because he's not all there. He thinks the ornament is Christmas gift. And to me, like, it's a cute memory because it's just my dad typically would have thought that even if there wasn't anything wrong with him, So it was like a nice memory. But then he felt, well, he was getting incontinent, we'll put it nicely, and falling a lot. So he got some doctor's appointments and stuff. Didn't tell any of us exactly anything. So we didn't know about this brain cancer issue yet, right? We just think but I also know when people are coming near the end that they become incontinent. So, I don't know, his birthday is in the middle of January. I cooked him what I always cook him. He didn't have an appetite, but he ate what he could. And then the next week, he fell off the toilet and hit his head. They took him in. They found the cancerous virus, right? I can't think of the word for it because it was just this crazy word, and they said it's super rare, so it wasn't like they said it a lot, right? Then he was in palliative right away, and he lived for about 4 more days after that. Um, the person I was with was a drug addict. And the night my dad died, he asked me for money. I gave him $20. He threw it in my face and told me it wasn't enough for drugs. So I was dealing with that. That's why my daughter was sleeping with my parents because he could not be trusted to have her alone because he had a problem. But anyhow, the problem doesn't need to be brought up. Like that's a whole other story. That's not the grief of my father in any way. So the night that happened, I spent the night in palliative with my dad, and he had a seizure. That was supposed to be a common thing for this disease, was really bad seizures, right? And he had a really bad seizure that they could almost not pull him out of. So I just kind of covered my head because I didn't want that's the last thing I seen, right? So the next day he seemed like I looked at his numbers and everything. He seemed okay. So I went to go see my daughter. And then I got a call from my aunt saying that get to the hospital. I make a call to get a ride to the hospital. I am in the driveway and the sun shone just a little brighter for a second. I noticed it, and then my aunt called me and said that he was gone. And obviously, I dropped to my knees and did almost what you'd think you'd see in a movie where you're screaming and crying. My mom could hear me. She came out and got me, and I waited for my ride. We did go to the hospital. He obviously was gone. So once I walked in the room, I started screaming, no, 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 no. They told me if I didn't stop screaming, I'd get kicked to the hospital. So they let it sink in that he was gone. They wouldn't let us look at the body long for reasons, right? Like
Yeah.
cleanliness reasons, I guess you could say. So we only had a certain amount of time. So I decided to calm myself down, take in what was happening, and walking away from that room was like the hardest thing I ever had to do, and I think ever will do. Picking out his urn was hard, but leaving him and seeing him for the last time was probably the hardest thing I will ever have to do unless something happens to my children. God, please don't ever strike me down for even saying that. I'm just saying because I don't want
I,
anything to happen to my children. But anyhow, that was very emotional. But then my family also, when they knew he was in that viral state in his mind, had him sign $120,000 pension away to the company he worked for. They didn't even give it to like my dad like dogs. Didn't give it to like a dog foundation. Didn't like give it to charity. They gave it to nobody because they dislike me so much, right? That they did that behind my back and told me that I was going to get the pension. So I was like, yes, I can keep my childhood home. My dad wanted me to keep that home. He wanted that to be the Bootle home. He always said that, and that's my last name, right? And I'll never change it. It's Bootle home, right? And my aunt used his mental illness against him and took that away from me. So I had to sell the home because it needed repairs that I could not afford. So I sold it and bought a house that was much smaller that I could afford, that had everything done already so that I didn't have to figure that financial portion out. But since then, my family hasn't spoken to me once. They don't care about me whatsoever. All they care about, and my aunt also got most of the inheritance, also, because that's why I created a certain thing that we spoke about. Because my aunt, she also took most of the inheritance. And I remember when he was in the coma, she was doing sneaky things with wills and stuff, right? And
Yeah,
then,
you shared a lot about that when we first talked, I remember. And I think it's crazy when we go through these processes of grief and loss that it brings out the worst in family members, right? Kind of like we discussed that, our who we think is going to be there for us when we're going through this loss oftentimes ends up being the people that hurt us the most in our most
yep,
vulnerable state of loss.
I completely agree. And it makes the grief worse because it brings on anger, and you're already grieving, and then it brings on anger towards somebody that is not another emotion you need to throw in the pot at the time, you're already trying to navigate life without somebody that was very important to you, you're trying to figure out where you stand. You're trying to get all their affairs in order, which is also a whole thing. And like being an
Yeah.
only child, my dad was too nice. I was too nice. And my mom told me that I should have paid more attention to what my aunt was doing. And I just don't like my mom's a little bit um she's like a taker kind of person. So I don't take her advice as seriously. I was more I my dad my personality was just like my dad's. That's why I lived with him up until he died and I was like 29 years old, you know?
Well, I
So
think
it was
Jasmine,
just
you shared a lot of things there. I wanted to just stop you for 1 second because you said a ton of things there that are really, really powerful. When you what you're talking about is a lot of us we hear about people passing away in our life and we don't actually know what that means. We don't know what's all involved in that process. And when somebody goes, like a family member, we don't always think about, is there a will in place? Is there inheritance in place that has to be worked out? Is there a house in somebody's name that's supposed to go to another person? There's all these things that have to get sorted out when our loved one passes. And so on top of us grieving their loss and trying to process that emotional train, we then get dealt another card on top of that, which is dealing with all the finances and the property and all that inheritance and settlement that goes on. And a lot of families don't really prepare for that. And so, on top of that too, I can share a lot of sentiment with you. When my grandfather died, when my great grandmother died, it was like everybody in the family said, let's raid the house, let's take everything. And it
yeah,
became less about
vultures. That's how
vulture.
I
That
feel.
there we
That's when the
go.
vultures come out. The claws come out when there's money involved. Everybody's nice. We're having a great time at Thanksgiving, but now that everything's going south, the claws are out.
Yeah, and it's crazy how, somebody like your father, like I love your story about your father when we first met because that's how I felt about my grandfather. I was really, really close with him. And when I saw people after he passed just attack viciously, I mean, it was just like throwing dagger after dagger and people just, like you said, vultures just swarming in there trying to get whatever they can get out of things. It almost feels like we completely forget about who died. We forget about their life, what they meant to us. And now it's all about these possessions, which, funny story, don't really mean much, truth be told.
They
Um,
didn't even let me speak at my dad's own celebration of life because they disliked me so much. But when he was still alive, they were nice as pie to me, right? But once the will had already been read and everything had been said and done, who has to put on fakeness at this point, right? And I'm the only child going against my aunt and my two cousins. Obviously, I lose, right?
Yeah, it makes it really hard because you feel just like you're almost ganged up on, for lack of a better term, trying to deal with that. I had the same thing happen when my grandfather died. The whole family I hadn't talked to in probably 5, 6 years ganged up on me like I was public enemy number one. And
My mom
I feel
popped out
for
of
you.
nowhere.
I feel for you in that aspect because I was sitting there going, well, I want to share his last minutes with you. I was there when he died. I watched him pass. Like I'm happy to give you what you're looking for, but it just became this like assault on things, just this attack and attack. And I was going, this man just died. He was a big part of our life, just like your father was a big part of your life and a big part of your family's life. And how you said, I can just tell he had a very big heart. I can tell just from how you're talking about him. And just to see people just completely disregard that, and now it becomes who's getting his inheritance, who's getting this, who's getting that. And like you said, flip-flopping in that state of we're nice while he's alive, but once he's gone, switching paths. That's really hard for people to understand that you're grieving the person you lost, and now you're grieving people that are still alive in your life, that are actually causing more harm on you than good in that moment.
Well, to be fair, I should have known my aunt was going to do that because when my dad's other sister passed away, she cut my two other cousins out of the family once my aunt passed away because she was angry that she didn't like the outfit my aunt was buried in. So she decided that they were cut out of the family. And they were kids. They were like the oldest one was probably like 10, like yeah, like 8 and 10, and my mom cut them right out. Or sorry, my grandma, or no, my grandma, sorry, my aunt cut them out. She did it slowly. She didn't do it because there's two of them. There's only one of me. So and an adult, right? So she doesn't have to call me up, like. But with them, their dad would be like, "It's Christmas time. We would like to still see everybody, right?" So she let them come two times maybe, and then she just made it like we weren't having Christmas or something like that. Or, somebody was sick and we had to cancel it. And then, it just snowballed from there. And me and my other cousin, we keep in touch with them through like social media and stuff. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to really find them again because we were so young ourselves, right? But we've been able to find them and talk to them and stuff like that. But it's just this my aunt that's still alive is not a nice person, and she'll go the length it takes to hurt somebody. But we kind of think that's why she's the only one that's alive, because her husband has had so many strokes that she they don't have a real relationship anymore. She's his caregiver. Her parents are dead. Her brother and sister are dead. Her one daughter she dislikes, which is the cousin that I still talk to on that side. And then her other daughter that she just takes advantage of by making feel guilty. And I don't know where that stands because that only can last so long. So my aunt is kind of left alone. And being lonely after with those kind of thoughts of the things that you've done throughout your life, being left to think about them is torture. So I think we get our own karma in our own ways.
Yeah, something you brought up a little bit ago on the podcast that I think is big that a lot of people don't understand about grief is, anger is a big part of that. And I think that society really has a bad idea of what anger actually is. We talk about anger in society as this really negative thing, like it's just bad. Don't talk about it. Don't be angry. And we shame people who get angry all the time. And I definitely will say, like, anger in its very extreme state is not a very good thing because there's negative things that come out of that. Obviously harm like you've experienced from your aunt. But there's also a part of anger that when you lose someone, that anger is actually a secondary emotion to love. It's a secondary emotion to feeling loss and feeling empathy. So anger can really be kind of this duality piece of the grief process that can be good and bad depending on how you use it.
Well, even today, well, what made me think of it was today my daughter's um biological father dropped off something for her because it's St. Patrick's Day. So he brought her a green backpack, and I was talking about my aunt and I was swearing a little bit. And he's like, Jasmine, stop talking like that in front of the kids. I'm like, my aunt makes me angry. And just thinking about that, and like, you're right, like, that is me acting out of character due to my anger. When reality, I would never act like that if I didn't feel that anger. And that anger is something that I think is something I need to learn how to work through because I don't want to always get angry when some version of her gets brought up and just all of a sudden be like, F her, you know what I mean? Because I don't talk like that normally. So even my kids kind of look at me and then they call him Daddy J. Was looking at me and they're looking at me with Daddy J, and I'm like, I'm
Well,
sorry.
it's
I didn't mean to swear. Like it just comes out, but like I get exactly what you're saying. It manifests itself, and sometimes we can't control how it does. Luckily, I'm a tiny woman that doesn't throw or punch things or hit people. I just swear, but it can
yeah.
manifest badly.
Well, it's the whole thing that anger is it's a process that a lot of people don't understand. 'Cause they see that side, like they associate anger with physical violence or swearing or all those things. And when you're in grief, you're dealing with a myriad of emotions. You're dealing with probably five, six, seven, eight emotions all at once hitting you. And so it's a lot to process for the brain because our brains can only process so much information at once. And the thing about anger, like you described with your aunt coming up, your aunt's been a big source of pain in the most pivotal moment of your life where you lost your father that you were extremely close to. So what a lot of people don't understand or don't see is that anger isn't anger to be malicious towards somebody. That anger is actually a lot of pain. It's a lot of
And
hurt. it's a
It
lot
is.
of it's a lot of misunderstood, not feeling seen or heard or understood. And I try to encourage people that when you do see that from somebody, when they get that triggered by another person, it's not so much that anger you need to worry about, it's what's underneath it, which is that pain of not being seen or heard or understood. And if you give somebody, by the way, space to process that or acknowledge them in that state instead of reacting to them, you'll find that anger goes away really fast. You'll find somebody saying, I'm hurt. I'm not angry. I'm hurt.
Well, he knew because we were talking about my father and stuff and like things that had happened because person with now was not there for it. So it would just it just came up in conversation a little bit about things and stuff like that. Like, you know, we were just chatting, and so he knows that that second I bring on my aunt, I'm gonna be triggered. So he right away says, Jasmine, you're swearing, because he knows that I will think fast enough not to say anything too bad, right? So that he knows me. I've known him for a very long time, even though like he has his problems. Yes, I don't live with him. My children see him once in a blue moon, or my daughter sees him when she sees him, and he doesn't do that around us. He just visited, but he knows me and he's grew up with me, so he knows my personality. So if he can see it coming, he knows how to stop it. It's same with the partner I'm with now because I'm a very open book person about my feelings. I feel like that's what's helped me with my grief is to not hold it in. It's to like scream it out. Like that's where all the screaming came from was just that feeling inside you where you just need to scream, just to release that sadness, that I don't know the word feeling of it, but just release that whoosh of energy, because that's negative energies, you kind of have to release it. And that's where the screaming comes from. And I believe when people get silent when somebody passes away, it's only less healthy for them than it is to talk about it. And I mean, you can talk about it a million different ways. You don't need to go to a therapist to talk about it. You can go with a friend, you can go to a support group. There's lots of different ways that you can find help doing that. Go to somebody like you, a grief coach, you know what I mean? There's so many ways that you can help yourself, and whatever you find best, go with that because you don't want to sit in that negative resentment, depression state for very long because
Yeah.
eventually it starts to take you over.
Well, that's what, a lot of people I've talked to recently have talked about getting stuck in the grief process. And I definitely was there for sure. So when you lose a child, that happens.
You'll,
And the thing that
I
you,
don't think I would ever get over that. So I commend you. And
yeah,
I've said that before.
I
I don't
had
know
people try
how.
to tell me that, and I said I'm never going to get over that. It's never going to happen. And and you
Like,
and you just can't because it's the
no,
same thing when you're
that's a
close to
part
your
of you.
father and you lose your father to cancer like that. I've been down that train too. When you have that doctor office that says, well, it's cancer and you got 12 months to live if you do nothing about it. You got a couple years if you're lucky if treatment works. Either way you go, when you hear those conversations as a normal human being, you're going, this outcome's not going to be what I want. Either way I go, it's not going to be what I want. And I also know, by the way, that I'm not even guaranteed any time of this at all. This could happen tomorrow. It could happen 6 months from now. It could happen 3 months from now. And it's a real hard thing to wrap your head around. And so when I share with people that, when you get stuck in grief and people say, well, you just have to move on or get over it or grief's a part of life, I tell them, no, that's not how that works because this thing and the heart that people have doesn't work that way. And so, when you said that when people get silent, it's holding things in, I'm a firm believer of that when you hold in all that negativity that you're experiencing, it will go somewhere or manifest outwards and not in a good way. And so I always encourage people, if you do get stuck or you are stuck in grief, that's fine, but I want you to actually work through those emotions while you're in that space. Don't hang on to it and cling to it, but give yourself space and give yourself permission to say, I don't feel okay today, and that's okay. I feel this right now, and that's okay. give yourself those
That's
permissions to
that's
feel the way
my
you do.
problem. I don't give myself permission to be like, it's okay to not feel good today. And then it builds up to the point where I burn out because I just take on so much because I'm like that when I know that I'm not feeling my best mentally. Instead of being like, I need a couple days of me time, or just not everything else going on around me. You know what I mean? But instead, I dive deeper into work and I take on more things. And then I get so burnt out that I really can't do anything for a few days because I don't feel good and I need to sleep. And like you said, I'm not really facing what's bothering me. So it's manifesting me into burning myself out and feeling guilty for not like doing fun things with my kids a little, like, you know what I mean? Instead, I'm doing a million things for work and school and everything else, and my other business, everything. Like, I just dive right in. And
Well,
that
because
is
that's
where it
because
manifests negativity, though, right?
Well, that's what happens to a lot of people is everybody has a coping mechanism. I don't care who you are, what your background is, everybody has one. And so some people in the grief process turn to drugs, some people turn to alcohol, some people turn to workaholic stage, or some people fall off the face of the planet. Everybody has their vice and their coping mechanism. The thing about it though is that when I'll just say I have a family member who will remain anonymous, always consumes themselves in work constantly. And what I'll share is those when you keep yourself busy like that, it's just a ticking time bomb in here. It's going to go off at some point.
That's
And
what
by
I
the
do,
way,
and I
when you
know
do
it.
that, it's going to go off in the worst opportune moment, by the way. It's not going to just sit
Well,
there
it
and wait
already
until it's,
did. It just did, I'd say last Tuesday. And it's taken me about till today to finally feel normal. So that ticking time bomb, it went off.
yeah,
And it took a long time. I thank God I have the spouse I do because not a lot of people he has the same kind of mental health issues I do. So he understands why I am acting that way, gave me my time, made sure I was fed, made sure that I wasn't if he told me to cancel meetings. He's like, no, you need today for you. You need to take time for yourself. This is why you're like this, right? And made sense. Took a few days to obviously mentally reconnect. Then you have those few days where you're a bit anxious because you now want to kind of fix things, and then you fix them a little bit and then you slowly acclimate back into life. And that's where I am today. So I will say the taking time bomb did go off. I'm not gonna lie. That was
yeah.
last week,
Well,
the whole
Well,
week.
the thing about that is that, there's this old school mentality that a lot of people have, which is controlling emotions. And I laugh when people say that, by the way, because emotions live up here. You can't touch them. You can't malleable move them around or anything like
Like
that.
that movie
Um,
the kids watch Inside Out where they have like little people controlling us in our brain.
Exactly. And I always tell people if you're walking around living in that mindset, if you can control your emotions, I'm going to be the first person to tell you that is the most harmful thing that you're doing to yourself. Because when we try to control things in the grief process, it oftentimes goes backwards and it blows up in our face. And so I
Well,
always
I
tell
felt
people,
that too.
I always tell people if you experience emotions, feel them. Do not ignore them. Do not suppress them. Not try to control them, but they are messages trying to come out to tell you something. So if you experience an emotion and you're not sure why you feel the way you do, ask yourself a powerful question. Don't say, why do I feel this way? Because when you say why, you blame yourself. Instead, say, what's causing me to feel this way today? And when you really sit there with that, by the way, you'll find out and say, you know what? I'm really upset because I'm upset about losing my dad, or I'm upset about losing my son, and my heart's really broken right now. And when you say that to yourself, what goes on inside your body is instead of this like tension that builds constantly, there's a release that happens. There's a calm that comes from that. And
But I
it's
didn't
a
realize it is blaming. So I sat there and I really
yeah.
sat on that. I'm like, wow, he's so right.
Because
Oh, because I'm a person who blames myself to begin with, so that just makes it even worse.
and think
Oh,
about it, when you go through the grief process, people will blame you for you. They'll take care of that for you. You don't have to.
oh yeah. And
They'll
that's
always
just
say,
what makes you
why are you
that's
still
what
feeling
makes you
this way?"
like that though. That's why you're so hard on yourself because everybody's been so hard on you. So you're like, oh,
So I encourage people all the time, don't say why questions to yourself. You're going to blame yourself and put yourself down. You already feel like crap. Don't do it to yourself. I
didn't
always
think of
tell
that,
people,
and I think it's great.
I always tell people the world will take care of that for you. Just like my family when I lost my grandfather, I can't recall half the stuff that happened 5 years ago, but I know it was a lot of hateful things that were aimed at me. And it was always why this, why that, why this, why that, and it was always blaming me for things. And the minute I let go of that and I started realizing they're taking care of the blame for me, so I don't need to blame myself. But what I do need to do right now is acknowledge myself and say, this is how I feel right here, right now, today. This is how I feel. And then I gave myself permission and said, that's okay, you feel that way. This is how grief's going to be some days. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. And so I share that with people I coach. I say, you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. There's no problem with you. You don't have some issue. You're not any of those things. You're the person that you are today because of what you experienced. And that's okay because I didn't have that experience. I don't know what it's like to lose a father, Jasmine. I don't know. So for me to even try to make any kind of, judgments or blaming statements like some people in your life have is ridiculous. So what is left there though is for somebody like me to make space for you and say, how can I support you today? Or how are you feeling today? And giving you that space to process that. That's a much more healthy way to give people room when they grieve.
Well, that would have stopped me from having a ticking time bomb because I went over to a friend's house who just got a new job, even though she's lived off of her husband. They have a bit more money than most people. So she lives in a little bit of a cloud nine world. So her trying to give me advice. Um, and she wasn't very nice about how she gave me the advice really, really triggered me mentally because I had been putting in so much. And she's like, how can you even feel stressed out? You don't work. Like, so basically, feelings minimized. And then her also telling me, you need to do this and this and this. You have so many steps to get your life to be where I think it should be. And we're going to call our friend Ryan and I'm going to tell him how to live his life. And it was just obviously not a safe space for me to be in that sense, right? And I have strong intuition, I knew that, but my daughter is good friends with her daughter, so I had to say yes even though I knew it wasn't good for me. Like I knew that she also was a little mad I didn't invite her to my kid's birthday party because she doesn't fit, her daughter and her don't fit in because they're they're not even really rich. They're the rich people, wink wink nudge nudge, right? But they talk like they have all these things and they do all these things. And everybody else here like is middle class, like we don't go to Mexico 3 times a year or anything. We'll go camping or go to like the amusement park or something like that. But she'd be like, ew, I would never go there. If you're like, oh, I'm going to Wonderland, ew, I would never go there. So things like that. So I didn't want to invite her because of the other kids' parents. I didn't want, they knew they would not mesh well. I knew it would not go well, but she knew she was mad at me for it. So I knew that she's mad at me for it. Plus, I knew her intentions were not good going into that conversation. And I knew that I was burnt out from everything I had taken on. And I put myself in a situation that went not well. And that's why I'm saying this to people. When you're starting to feel that and don't do like what I did. Don't ignore that feeling. Stay home. Don't push yourself because otherwise you'll end up just mentally. in a really dark place for a little while because it's not safe for you. And so
Yeah,
don't
they
put if you feel it's not going to be safe, don't do it.
Yeah, that's a big part of the grief process that you hit on is talking about being around safe people versus unsafe people. And a lot of people that go through grief, I didn't really know this till I went through the motions with it, but you're in a very vulnerable place when you go through loss. You are a very vulnerable person. And the reason I say that is that you're gonna have people trying to give you advice, telling you what to do, telling you how to deal with grief in their way. They're going to tell you how to change your life, how to do certain things. And you're going to be very vulnerable enough in that place of sometimes you may not stand up for yourself. You may just start tolerating and allowing it. It's what I like to
I've
call it.
given people money
Um,
because I was
and
in a grieving state. You hit right the nail on that one too.
And I tell people all the time, by the way, we all make that mistake. So this is no judgment here, by the way, because I did it a lot and I had to learn, by the way, from that.
I
But
had
what
to
I try
learn
to
too.
empower people to do is that when you are in that vulnerable state, I want you to know that you still have your power. You still have the choice to make decisions for you. And regardless of what anybody thinks, including myself, regardless of what anybody else thinks, you ultimately have the choice and the power and control to decide what's best for you. And so, don't let anybody try to dictate or guide your course of healing or your grief journey or how to process that stuff. It's not their business. It's not their place to tell you. I have a big saying that grievers don't want to be fixed. We will figure that out on our own. But what we do need is just space, somebody to hold space for us, and while
Somebody to be
we work through that.
supportive. Like
Yeah,
somebody to be like
exactly.
everything is gonna be okay eventually, not well, you need to do this, this, and this, because that's not what we want to hear. We just or don't say anything and just sit with us while we cry or while we talk.
Exactly, because a lot of people, that's the natural instinct, by the way, in society is like, let me tell you how to fix this. And it's a big thing I don't like in the coaching space, by the way. I see a lot of coaches do that. Do this, fix that. Here's the thing you can do. And I'm going, people don't want to be fixed. They want to know information so that they can figure out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I always share with people on grief journeys too. Don't compare losses. Losing a child is not the same thing as losing a father. It's not the same as losing a
Losing.
mother or a brother or your pet or whatever person left the world from you. None of those losses are going to be the same. And I also tell people, by the way, your emotions with one person might make you a colossal wreck going through grief. You might lose somebody else and not feel a thing. So I said it's really a very individual journey and an individual path that you take. And so if you find people, by the way, that don't compare loss, but say, I have gone through grief a little bit. I'm happy to talk with you and help you process that as best I can, and just give you space to work through those emotions. That's a safe person to talk to. And that's the kind of person you want, by the way, is somebody that holds that space for you.
Well, that's why I have a mental health group on Facebook where you can post anonymously, and I accept all of the things so nobody can put anything negative up there. Non-judgmental for that reason, because I have friends that have lost their parents too, and some days you're just not feeling the best and you want to talk about it. I post things all the time just to make sure they know that they're not alone, and I've found that it's actually helped a lot more people than I thought it was going to. And it was something that I found at first was just because I know that there's a lot of people with mental health issues, but the grief aspect is where a lot of people are at. And I didn't realize how many people were truly grieving. And you don't know, right? But you don't know when you see like a friend, they might not say anything about something that even maybe an aunt that was super personal to them, but you haven't seen them in 10 years. So how would you know that? So, and they don't act like anything's wrong, so you don't know, right? And then that's where that space is, so that if you want to get it out, because you're obviously not really getting it out, it's not the same, it's anonymous, it's this, it's you can say whatever you want, nobody's going to care, instead of saying it to a friend who you haven't seen in 10 years and wondering how they're going to react, or even they might be like, oh yeah, I remember your aunt, and tell you like 8 stories, and that's not what you want to hear, you know? So
Yeah,
I have
I
that for that reason.
I like that you brought up, going on Facebook and being able to post anonymously. I can say as a griever, that's one of the best things you can do, by the way, because you will, unfortunately, Facebook's kind of a 50-50 thing with that. Sometimes you'll get people that are very supportive and kind and they want to help you, legitimately want to help. Other times you're going to get that one-off jerk that just wants to tell you what, every way in which way you're wrong and kind of add insult to injury, for lack of a better term. And so
I
being able
had
to
them
post anonymously, gives you that space to ask, really be open and honest with yourself, but also gives you control again to say what you want to allow and tolerate in that conversation.
exactly because I had somebody from my podcast get attacked due to being part of the LGBTQ community. And so that's where the anonymousness came from. And I have anonymous guests on my show now if they would choose to be, because this person was brutally attacked. It's sickening that that's how our country treats people. I don't need to get into it or take anything from grief from it, but this person was talking about a story about how they'd lost their mother because their mother had been murdered due to drugs. And people did, this person was devastated because all they wanted was their mother's story told, not people to focus on her looks. And it really made it took it took, like she said, it took her story away from her and made it all about something that it didn't have to be. So now I have anonymous guests also, because I don't want it, if it is somebody talking in that regard about loving their parent and then their parent being murdered and they come home and find that and all this other stuff, they like, and having to pick up the pieces from that, all of that kind of stuff. They don't, they want to talk about that. That was their therapy. That's what she said to me. That was my therapy. It was getting that out of me, you know? And I just wanted the world to know I love my mom and leave her legacy, kind of like what I meant with my father, you know? And everybody just was so mean. So yeah, the anonymous thing is super important for me. Even for guests on my podcast, guests, um, anybody who does anything that I work with, they have the option to be anonymous because I don't want to ever see anybody be hurt like that again.
Yeah, it's sad that we live in a society today, and and it happens, believe it or not, a lot being a lost parent. I'll tell you that. I see it a lot, and it's really frustrating to hear people, make comments online about don't show pictures of your baby, don't, why are you doing that? It's gross or wrong, and people have all these errant opinions, and what I'll say about that, because I've dealt with it a lot online, is that when you do get all those haters, and that's what I call them, is haters, because that's all they're filled with is hate. They got a whole lot of things to say to people, but they've never walked the walk of life. That's the funny part about those people. And so I had that happen to me once in a group that I was on Facebook. A lady had just lost her child, and she posted a picture of her baby, and somebody said something rude. So I posted a picture of my son to her, and I said, "Hey, I'm really sorry that you had to go through what I went through." And I just said, "This is a club you and I never wanted to be part of and didn't ask for, but I want you to know you're not alone." And I got attacked and I started getting kind of worked up. And then all of a sudden, I'm not even kidding, probably 5 or 6 lost parents started ganging up on the hater. They were really vicious
Oh
back.
yeah,
And
it got nasty, the same
it,
thing, and then it was just it.
Yeah, it just got crazy. And I try to tell people online, when somebody's going through a loss like that, especially people that have had lost a parent to murder, I mean, that's really heavy. I haven't experienced that, but I'll just say I've talked to people who have, and it's a very hard thing to come to terms with. Very, very hard. When you talk to
Because
people who have lost
the
a child,
parent was a
it's
drug addict this person's whole life, put her through foster care, all this other stuff. She was her mother's caregiver, was out for the evening, and came, just had a feeling that she had to go home, and she went home and she found that. But everybody focused on her sexuality, which had nothing, the story had nothing to do with sexuality, it had to do with her grief and how she went through her grief, how she felt about her parent, how even though they like one was an act, one wasn't. They still loved each other, and she was still there for her mother, and her mother was still her best friend, and she misses her mother every day. That's all she wanted to convey, and nobody cared, and that was
Yeah.
that. You're right. It's they are haters, and it's because you're right. They have nothing else to do besides get us going and giving,
Yeah.
like what my
And
husband always says is giving into them is them getting to you. So he's like, no, turn the comments up. Do not start arguing. Turn the comments up right away
yeah,
because I am a little bit fiery because I was bullied in high school. So I get quick to be like,
yeah. Well,
oh, that
it's
was a
the
bad
whole
taste.
it's the whole thing of that, people like that just have not gone through loss in life. They haven't. They don't know what it's
I
like.
know.
And so they find, again, like I said, we're very vulnerable as grievers because we've lost something very important to ourselves. But there's people out there that the only way they walk through life by is just hate. I don't have a better way to say it, but they just love to hate on people. And because of, and maybe I'll say this, because I wasn't Mr. Perfect child growing up. I got bullied too, and I had a bad attitude about it. I'll be honest. But I'll just say, when you go through a loss, you lose a child, you lose a parent, you lose a grandparent, you lose somebody very close to you. That puts things in perspective really, really fast about what
Really
you value out
fast.
of life. And so when I see those people making those comments like that, there's a big part of me that does want to lash out and say, you have no idea what I've gone through. But I also at the same
Mhm.
time, when I saw those lost parents step up in my defense, step up to this lady who just lost her daughter 3 months ago. When I saw them step up and say, that's not right. That's not fair. And I sat there and said, you know what? Forget about the hater. I don't even care about that person, by the way. I said, what I do care about is this mom that is now going to walk the walk I've walked for 2.5 years. And she has no idea how painful it's going to get. And so I said, I'm not going to worry about that guy over there that's talking smack, but what I am going to do is come over here and I'm going to say, if you need somebody to talk to, I'm here for you. I'm going to help you out. Because I had to do it alone. And maybe if you don't have to do it alone, it'll be just a little easier. And when I say that, I mean like 1% easier. It's not going to be like, oh, you're rainbow unicorn and glitter the next day. It's not going to be that. But I want to make sure that people get support. And so that's something I've found on this grief journey I'm on is that us grievers, we support each other. We take care of each other. We don't care what title, label, whatever it is you are. We don't care. We just see somebody that lost somebody in their life that mattered to them. And you're a person. I'm a person. All those labels don't matter. Like at that point, it's just how can we help each other? How can we come together? And that's what I think is such a beautiful thing about grief. Grief doesn't discriminate. I'll tell you
No, but
that.
it does bring people together, and I totally agree. And I think that it is a very beautiful way of looking at it.
Well, because to be very honest, the one thing that people forget in this life is, by the way, we eat with the same silverware, we drive the same cars, we drive down the same roads, we walk the same sidewalks, we shop at the same stores. And to be, not to be too crude on my podcast, but I'm gonna say it anyway, we all use the same toilet and shower every day. All of us do.
Hmm?
So at the end of the day, like, are we really that different? Are we really that much different that
No.
somebody's better than one another? I don't think so. I think we have
Well,
different experiences that lead our life one way or the other, but I think in the end of the day, we have more common with ourselves than we allow ourselves to believe.
that's the part that I think people don't understand is we have so much more in common with each other. But because people's egos get in the way, I think it kind of sometimes gets lost in translation. And if people could only like just stop for a minute, and think instead, like, I mean, like, say somebody who's like a billionaire, they would never speak to me because they would think they were better than me. But if they actually sat down at a table and talked to me, they would probably be my best friend by the end of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
it's
just this
I've
their
I've talked to
perspective.
people on this podcast from Africa to Australia to the Netherlands to Canada I don't remember where, Venezuela. Shit, I'm trying to remember all the people I've talked
I
to.
know,
And
right? Botswana, they're
and
fun ones. I always get a good
yeah, but
laugh from the
this
people from
this is the
Botswana.
crazy part. We all experience grief the same way, regardless of our culture, regardless of our backgrounds. It's so powerful that I've talked to people thousands of miles away from me in an entire different culture, entire different country, with an entire set of different rules, and we all grieve the same. It's fascinating. So
It really is.
yeah,
Well, because it's human
yeah.
nature, right? It's like with animals, they have natural instincts. It's the same thing as humans. So it doesn't matter where you're from, you still have that same natural instinct to have that feeling, of loss.
Yeah. Definitely. So, Jasmine, I want to tell you as we got to wrap up on the podcast today, but if you ran into somebody that was just getting into grief or maybe feel stuck in grief, I like to ask all my listeners this one. What's one or two pieces of advice you would give somebody to help navigate that just a little bit easier?
Definitely using different terminology when speaking to themselves
Mm,
instead of using why or I, be like, what's happening to make me feel this way? Because I believe that putting those words on yourself because of the anxiety that I hold just creates more anxiety. And another one I think I would take away, especially because I have a friend who thinks that she eats off a silver spoon, is to kind of talk about, we all still come from the same place. Her father actually has brain cancer right now, so she really shouldn't be pushing me away. But I'm going to say, when you need me in the hardest time, you're going to realize that we aren't better. Not one, you're not better than me, and I'm not better than you. And maybe you'll finally listen to me and get help from me through my experiences instead of telling me what to do. I won't tell you what to do. I will guide you through the process of what has happened. I guess would be the two things.
that's a beautiful piece of advice on there. And that's what I think is powerful about people like us who've gone through grief is we don't judge people going through it, but we're here for them. If they ever need it, we'll help guide them through the process. And that's the one big beautiful gift that we do get out of the hard times that we've gone through. I wanted to ask as we get wrapped up, where can people find you and connect with you online?
The easiest place to find me online would be Facebook or YouTube, but they're both under Jasmine Bootle, or any major podcast platform under Everyone is Addicted. But I do two different types of jobs. So one is the podcast about addiction. The other one is a divination business. So if you want to get in touch with me about readings, like psychic readings or induced death communication readings, or readings that help you communicate with a past loved one so you can move on, then private message me on Facebook. We'll talk way more about that. And like I said, the podcast is Everyone is Addicted on any major platform. Um, and YouTube, first and last name.
I
Thanks,
love
Chris.
that. Well, Jasmine, thank you for being on the show today. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Jasmine and I on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Jasmine's story. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want to invite you guys to follow our podcast at empowergriefjourney.com. You can also, when you go to that website, you'll find us on Apple and Spotify. I want you guys to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your journey one step at a time.